The recreation hall of the compound was ablaze with light and bursting with noise. It was jammed full of silos, and they were mostly drunk. It was a grand party on the evening of the semi-annual firing. Char and 2 other executives were going home. It was something to celebrate, the end of a duty tour on this accursed planet. Attendants rushed about with saucepans of cabango, held 6 or 8 at a time in their paws. Female silo clerks, released from the crowded decorum and the cowed behaviour that was their normal lot, joked and got their bottoms smacked. A couple of fights had already started and ended without anybody discovering what the fight had actually been about. Games of chance and marksmanship were a tangle of disorganized confusion. Jokes of a bawdy and discreditable nature were being buffeted at the departing executives. Have a saucepan of maize at the claw of the imperial city. Don't buy more wives than you can handle in one night. Tell them a thing or two at home office about what it's like out here, the mangy slobs. The atmosphere was so convivial that even Kerr was included, and the midget sat with pompous importance, trying to judge a contest of just how many bites a minute could be taken from a saucepan with the participants' paws held behind him. 5 executives were chanting a school yell that went, "Silo, silo, silo! Kill 'em, kill 'em, kill 'em!" over and over, tunelessly but loud. Down back at the firing platform, a train of pack horses, hooves muffled with furred hide, moved silently out of the ravine and through the dark toward the unit morgue. Unlit morgue. I'm sorry, my eyesight is terrible. The greenish compound glow reached toward them unrevealingly. A faint click of metal as AnneMcCaffery unlocked the morgue door with a master key. God, they got so skillful with 3,000-year technology. Char was very drunk and reeling. He walked unsteadily over to Turl, who looked drunk but was cold and tensely sober. "That's a good idea," says Char. He was always a nasty drunk, and the more drunk he got, the nastier he got. "What is?" said Turl through the uproar. "Tell him a thing or two at home Tell him a thing or two at home office." Yeah. Turl went very still. Char did not see his eyes narrow and flame. Then Turl said in a drunken slur, "I got a little present for you. Char. Come outside and I'll stop being a wurzel for a minute." Char lifted his eyebrows. I ain't got a mask. There's mask behind park door. Unabsorbed by the rest, Turl steered him to the hall, and they got into masks in a tangled fashion. Turl went through the atmosphere lock, dragging Char behind him. Turl led him down near the zoo cages. There was no fire burning. It was too late. There was no bundle in front of the cage. The spring chill of the exterior revived Char just a trifle, and he returned to being nasty. "Animals, yeah, you're an animal lover, you fucking shag 'em. Turl, I never did like you, Turl." Turl was not listening to him. What was that down by the morgue? He peered more closely. There were animals down there. "You're awful clever, Turl, but you're not clever enough to fool me." Turl took a couple of steps toward the morgue, trying to see in the dark. He took out a pocket torch and flashed it in that direction. Brown hide? Hard to see. Then he got a better view of it, a small herd of buffalo. They'd been drifting north for days now, mixed in with some horses. He turned the torch off. The casually walking hooves, and, well, they were distant, tiny thuds. Louder were the squeaks and crunches of the new spring grass being pulled up as the herd grazed its way along. My God, my eyesight. An owl was hooting off somewhere. The owl had asthma. Unusual nonsense on this cursed planet. He gave his attention back to Char. Turl put his arm around Charles' shoulder and guided him back to a point where the circles of the compound domes made a recess as they met. It was very dark here, hidden from all views. "What didn't fool you, my friend, my friend Char?" The owl hooted again. His asthma was cured. Turl looked around. There were no vantage points on which they could be seen. Char was sneering. The blast cat smoke. He pulled his face mask very close to Turl's. He reeled and Turl held him up. What about it? Well, that was no blast gun that went off in the office. That was a blasting cat. You think an old mom boss like me can't smell the difference between a blast gun and a blasting cap? Turl's paw was reaching for the small of his own back, under the jacket. He'd been trying to work out a way to furnish a reason for launching the gas round day after tomorrow. He suddenly had it, and without stirring up any psychic powers either. Pointing curl, that miserable excuses hours before. You ain't clever enough for some people, maybe, but you're not clever enough for me, Turl. I'll see right through you. Why? What do you think? I don't have time to think. When I get home, I can tell them a thing or two. You ain't so smart. Turl, think I don't know one smoke from enough. Other people will agree with me when I get home. Turl shoved 10 inches of stainless steel knife into Char's heart. It was the knife Johnny had given to Chrissy. He lowered the sagging body down to the ground. He took a nearby scrap of discarded tarpaulin and covered it. Turl went back to the cage and looked in. The girls were sleeping. The buffalo herd was still moving quietly past the morgue. Turl went back inside. There was more to do tonight, but just now the party must not realize he had been absent. He joined the silos who were chanting. They were very drunk. Down at the morgue, men moved carefully so as not to disturb the buffalo. They had been drifting them into the place from the plane. The horses were unloaded and they were gone. Nobody had observed the murder of Char. It was not possible to get that close to the domes without being seen. Those in the morgue continued their work, unaware that a new factor had been entered into the planning, one they did not know about and had not predicted. The farewell party continued to racket noise out of the compound, unaware that their guest of honor was missing. Johnny lay in a coffin at the near end of the morgue. The lid was tightly propped open to give him air and an interior view. On the outside roof of a button camera brought the exterior scene to a hard-hand viewer resting beside him in the dark confines. He was dressed in chinko blue, but he wore moccasins, all the better to speed him today. For today, in the space of just 2 exact minutes, he had to cover certain exact grounds and do very drilled and exact things, and do them in exact time. And he really does like using the word exact, or the whole project would fail, and he would be dead, and Chrissy and Jobbik Patty would die as well, and all the transvestites, the Scots, and all the others left on Earth would die. Exactly. He heard the transshipment control tower warning horn for the incoming phase. Motors off. Stand clear. The humming came on. The ground vibrated. The coffin lid trembled. The humming built up and up. Suddenly 200 new incoming silos appeared on the platform along with their baggage. The humming dropped. A faint vibration remained. Coordinates holding and linked up with second stage. The whole area came to life. 1 hour and 13 minutes would elapse until they fired back to silo. Personnel department members were herding up the incoming draft and putting them off to one side and getting them into line. Turl eyed the assemblage. The last time a draft had come in, he had had a bad shock, and now he wasn't taking any chances. He was half expecting to find a new Planet Head in this lot, somebody to replace Kerr, and he might have to think fast. He walked down the line, not looking at baggage. He was no interest in contraband. He was just looking at faces through their dome transport helmets. Checking off names. 200. More Vodenum's nonsense to get as many on the swindle payroll as he could. Turl went down the whole line. He breathed a sigh of relief. No replacement here for Kerr. Just the usual gutter sweepings from the slums of Silo, plus the occasional oddball junior executive and a couple of graduates from the mine school. Just routine. Not one in the lot that could qualify as a planet head. All a bit lethargic. No agents, no IBI. Tyrrell raised the porter personnel and they divided some off for the waiting transport planes destined for other mine sites, and some to the berthing here. They loaded them on the flatbeds and their baggage, and they were gone. That was a relief to Tyrrell. He approached the morgue, that blasted horse of the animals that was always hanging around the compound, was grazing in the back of the morgue. "Get away from here," says Tyrrell, going Australian, and the horse made poor motions to shoo him away. The horse looked at Tyrrell and said, "What the fuck are you doing in Australian accent?" And then Tyrrell went to open the door, and it came even closer. Tyrrell unlocked the morgue door and threw it wide. Sounds like my ex. There were 10 coffins lying there, ready to be scooped up by lift machines. He checked for the small X marks on the covers. Nothing like taking precautions. Every lid had its little X mark. He patted one of them fondly. He took a deep breath. Maybe 8 or 10 months from now, he would be digging these up some dark, silent night in the isolated and dreary cemetery on Silo. And there would be riches. Power! The fruits of his project were hard won. They wouldn't be that hard to spend. The first lift came, thrust its prongs under a coffin. Tyrrell went back outside. He checked off the name on the records, the second coffin, the third, the fourth. Tyrrell looked at the fourth one, a bit puzzled. How come he had spelled Jed's first name wrong? Not Snit, but Stinny. He checked for the X, and that was there. Ah, crap with it. He'd entered the error on the record. One good false name deserved another. The ex-agent was good and dead, and that's all that mattered. The lifts were dumping the coffins any which way on the platform. Tyrrell watched, a bit apprehensive at the rough handling, but none landed upside down. 9 of the coffins were lying out there now. The lift superintendent stopped his machine beside Tyrrell and let him check off number 10, the last one that he was carrying. "These coffins, they seem awfully heavy," commented the superintendent. Tyrrell looked up, masking any alarm. They were only about 100 pounds overweight. Not enough to notice, and certainly not enough to make much difference to a lift machine. The coffins should weigh about 1,700 each, even with those lids. "Your power cartridge is probably half discharged," said Tyrrell. "Maybe," said the superintendent. Coffins seemed to be like 3,000 pounds, but he rode the machine over and dumped the last one on the platform. The personnel department flatbed, without going for personnel, had come up. Its driver was looking a little bit harassed. There were 5 silos and their baggage on the truck, 2 of them returning executives, and the other 3 ordinary miners, all going home. The driver gave Tyrrell the list. "You'll have to change that list," said the driver. "Char is supposed to be on it. He was scheduled to go home today, and all of us in personnel have been running around looking for him, and we can't find him. His baggage is here, but we cannot find the Char." "Which is his baggage?" says Tyrrell. The driver pointed to a separate pile, and Tyrrell swept it off the truck with one sweep. Well, it's just one big sweep of his arm. "We looked everywhere. Shouldn't we hold up the firing?" "You know you can't do that. Did you know what the beds are all female admin people? If you try looking there, you could have his head up some pussy ass there, right? Then go and have a look." The driver let out a laugh. "I guess we should have done that. Look, there was some pretty party last night." "We'll fire him off in 6 months," says Tyrrell. And he wrote down 5 years later on a document after Charles' name, and he signed it. The personnel flatbed went off to dump the passengers upon the platform. They stood about in a group, making their firing helmets sure, making sure they were on tight. They were several feet away from the coffins. Tyrrell glanced at his watch. 1 hour and 11 minutes. 2 more minutes to go. Coordinates holding on the second stage. The bullhorn was blasting the information through to the base. The white light was flashing. Tyrrell walked back to the morgue. That blasted fleeing horse was poking around the door. Tyrrell made shooing motions with his paws. The horse moved off a few steps and then began to graze again. It was a relief to see these coffins out there. Turl stood gazing upon them fondly. About 1 minute to go. Then his hair seemed to stand on end. From within the morgue, the empty, deserted morgue, came a voice. When that last coffin had gone out the open door, Johnny had silently slid out of his coffin. He had 3 kill clubs thrust into his belt, and he was holding a 4th, the heaviest one. He laid a picto recorder player in the middle of the floor with one flashing motion and backed up behind the door. The shadow of Turl outside lay across the floor. The recorder started to play. It was a recording of Turl's own voice, and it said, "Jade, you silly crunch, what a crap lousy IBI agent you were." It was playing loud enough to be heard outside. The shadow of Turl contracting, turning. The recorder said, "It ain't smart, Jade, to come in here worrying your betters." Turl lunged for the door, slamming it shut with a frantic hand. He raised his boot to stamp the recorder into oblivion. And I've now got the theme music to the game Oblivion in my head. Dun, 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 dun. Sorry. Johnny dove forward with a motion he had drilled and drilled and drilled with a dummy. The kill club crashed into Turl's skull. With his other hand, even as Turl fell forward, Johnny ripped the pocket flap open and got the remote control box for the cage. A horn was going off outside. "Coordinates holding on first stage. Motors off." Johnny hit Turl again. The body collapsed. Johnny ripped the breathe mask off Turl's face and threw it clear to the far end of the morgue, where it landed with a clatter. He bent over Turl. Green blood was running down the side of the monster's head. The feet were drumming. Then Turl was still. There was no breathing. The eyes seemed glazed. He would have liked to put a shot in Turl. He took the belt gun, but he didn't dare shoot. Until those wires out there started to hum, they could stop the firing. The instant the wires began to hum, he knew the process was irreversible. The bullhorn bawled, "Stand clear!" The wires began to hum. Johnny's 2 minutes had begun, and they might well be his last 2 minutes alive. He had clicked on the stopwatch on his wrist. He flashed out the door and twisted the lock closed behind him. In these 2 minutes, nobody would fire a gun, since it might hit wires or mess up the coordinate settings. He took in the scene. Winspeter was only 3 paces away from where he was supposed to be, but Johnny was on him with a flash and a hill jump, and they were running. In a flying blur, they raced to the platform. The humming was intensifying. Anything that stayed on that platform was going to silo, where they couldn't even breathe the atmosphere. And a very messy arrival this would be, if all went well. Winspeter's hooves hit the metal of the platform, and he reared to a stop as Johnny dove for the first coffin. His fingers sought a little round ring that imperceptibly stood out just under the lid at the top end. He pulled it, and a strip came away in his hand. 1. Second coffin, ring found, pulled, strip in hand. 2. The third coffin, ring, strip. 3. An hysterical silent voice came from the bullhorn. "Clear the platform! Clear the platform!" The small group of silos began to weaving around the coffins, and they woke up and they saw something strange going on. They stared. One of the executives, hung over from the party, raised his arm to point. 4th, 5th, 6 rings. In these coffins were 10 planet-buster nuclear missile bombs, forbidden by treaty because they could crack the planet's crust and spray the world with fallout. Packed around them were the dirtiest, earliest radioactive atomic bombs, outlaws because of their extreme pollution potential. The 7th ring was bent, and Johnny fumbled with it. "Grab him!" screamed an executive on the platform. The 5 silos moved to attack. Johnny threw his kill club at the executive. He went down. Johnny yanked 2 more kill clubs from his belt and hurled them in a blur of speed. 2 more silos went down. He got back to number 7. He twisted it, twisted, and he got it out. He grabbed number 8 and pulled it. There was a suicide squad of Scots in the bushes, standing by in case at the last moment Johnny failed. He had forbidden it, but they insisted. He had time to run. He wanted no dead transvestites. Johnny had refused to simply let the fuses be set. If the firing had been cancelled, they would have blown Earth out of existence. They had to be sure the irreversible action of actual firing was in progress before those few strips had been pulled. 9 strips in hand. The 2 remaining silos had been further away, but now they were coming. "Strike!" shouted Johnny and Winspector. The horse reared and struck the nearest silo. The last monster on the platform reached to grab Johnny. 10. Johnny struck with a kill club and smashed the silo's helmet. The reaching talons tore his sleeve. He struck again. He leaped to the back of Winspector. "Run!" Someone on the control porch had come out with a blast rifle, but dared not dare shoot. The humming wires were building up to a crescendo. Johnny was off the platform and racing up the hill to the cage. His watch said 42 seconds left to go. He had never known time to fly so slowly or so fast. He had not gone to silo, but the blast rifles were waiting to cut him down. He had already switched the remote control box he had recovered to shut off the current to the bars. He had gotten out of the metal severing tool so he could slash off the girl's collars. Winspector plunged down to a halt before the cage door. Johnny threw himself off the horse. He paused for an instant. The cage door was open. The wooden barrier was torn aside. Where were the girls? Their effects were all here. Not all. There was a man under the robes. They must be still asleep. He rushed in, metal tool ready to cut the collars, shouting their names. No motion from the robes. He threw the furs aside. He was staring at the corpse of Char. It lay on its back, and the stainless steel knife he had given to Chrissy was sticking out of Char's middle. He had no time for speculation. He was out of the cage and staring about. Old Pork and Dancer were not there. Could it be possible the girls had actually killed Char and escaped? Not likely. They're females. Not the remote control box still within Turl's possession. Seconds were ticking by. Blast rifles were waiting. He leaped upon Winspector and dashed for the edge of the bluff. They started a small avalanche as they halted halfway down the slope. Johnny sprang off and made sure they were covered from sight. The humming came to a top crescendo. The strange quiver in the air. He recognized the feeling. The shipment had shimmered and vanished from the platform. Now would come the usual minor recoil that followed a semi-annual firing. Johnny counted the seconds. He was panting heavily from his sprint. Winspector beside him was blowing and trembling. Suddenly the ground shook. The air was rent with a splintering crash. A flash lit the sky. Recoil? It sounded more like the place had blown up. Johnny scrambled to the top of the cliff and peered over the edge. Too much recoil. By fuse, the nuclear weapon should not have gone off on Silo for another 10 seconds. The operations dome was still in the air, flames geysering from it. The network of wires around the platform was melting. Machines in the area were sent skidding. Silo operators were tumbling to the earth. Wild aura-like sheet lightning boomed over the transshipment scene. The compound domes were rocked, but seemed intact. The concussion was racketing across the plain. It was too soon for the bombs to go off on Silo. What was happening? Had they missed their target and landed their lethal cargo on some nearer space? Did this mean Silo's armament from the home planet could still appear in the sky and crush them all? But right now the question was, had this messed up the assault plans? He looked anxiously toward the row of battle planes. The instant after recoil was their cue. He looked toward the nearby ravines. Scott teams in camouflage radiation dress were due to sprint out from cover and take positions with their weapons. That recoil might also be radioactive, and here he was, with no radiation battle suit. Yes, they were the battle planes, 16 of them, and they were manned, each with a pilot and co-pilot. They had hidden in the planes all night. Keys to them had been placed on each seat. Up roared the battle planes, a blasting combined roar with heavy motors. 32 Scott pilots and co-pilots. 15 planes peeled off and darted at hypersonic speed toward their destinations. 1 plane for each distant mine site on the planet. The mission was to batter and destroy them, to prevent a counterattack here. 1 plane to act as air cover for this central mine site. Radio silence was the watchword. No warnings. Johnny looked at the remaining planes upon the ground to see whether they had been battered. He did notice they had been a bit turned around, but they seemed okay. Wait, something was wrong. There should only be 4 planes left there. They had 32 pilots and co-pilots, but there were only 3 planes left, not 4. He raised himself from the cliff edge again and swept the scene. And there it was. The whole side of the morgue had been battered out, and the coffin with which it had been done lay in the rubble. Turl had somehow come to life and hammered his way through the morgue. Johnny looked up. Where there should have been one battle plane up there for this mine site, there were two. Johnny grabbed for Winspeter. Something was wrong. The horse had gone lame in its lunge down the cliff. It was 300 yards to those planes. With a glare at the sky, Johnny was running down the hill, putting all his strength into it. A blast rifle spattered him from the compound. It raced on through the cloud of dirt. Where was the assault teams? Had they been knocked flat? Racing, Johnny headed for the nearest battle plane. Shots streaked the air above him. More blast rifles were firing from the compound. He got out the plane door and got it half shut. He got it half open, then he tried to get in. A blast rifle slammed its door shut. He dove under the plane and went around to the other side. The key, where had Angus put this plane's key? He was scrambling through the edges of the seats. The recoil jolt had jarred the key off his seat. A blast rifle splattering shot into the windscreen. Where was the key? It's on the floor. The instant before he touched the starters, he heard the clunk of a bazooka go. Then the flailing clatter of assault rifles. The motor barked and he raised his hands over the console. The plane flashed upward to 2,000 feet. He caught a glimpse of the attack groups moving in. 2 bazooka teams, 4 assault rifle parties. They had been protected in the ravines in which they had been crouched all night, covered with anti-heat shield. Johnny flipped on the view screens. Where was Turl? Where was Turl? A few miles to the north, Turl and the mine site cover plane were engaged in a dance of battle. Johnny slammed his battle plane toward the 2 ships. Suddenly they moved farther north. One plane was running away to the north, and the other took off in pursuit. 2 Scots running away? No, never. Johnny suddenly understood what was happening. It was a trick. Turl was pretending to run away to lure the Scots into a trap maneuver. Radio silence. Damned radio silence. The Scots had fallen for it. Before Johnny could get there, Turl had looped back with deadly fingers of flame were raking the Scots ship. The target flamed. It roared toward the ground. 2 men ejected, right and left. The jetpacks, smoking, and they bit and they arrested their falls. They were sailing some distance apart. If Johnny could get behind Turl whilst he was still concentrating on the plane. Yes, he had to. Turl dove to shoot one of the pilots, unable to resist a sadistic touch. The pilot was hit and spun back upward. Johnny was right behind Turl. He pressed the gun trips, and the artillery blasters knifed into the ship. Then abruptly Turl's plane was gone. A quick glance at the view screens and Turl was above him, but Turl didn't shoot. Abruptly Johnny realized that Turl was going to ignore him and try to get back to the compound and shoot up the ground troops. The keynote of the silo battle tactics was outguessing a plane's keyboard. The planes could dart so quickly and change at such drastic speeds that one had to divine what the other would do and then do it first. Johnny snapped his battle plane in front of Turl's. For an instant he could see the face mask silo through the armored windscreen. It was Turl. A madly efficient Turl. A Turl, for all his insanity, was a past master at flying and a top marksman. Johnny wondered whether he could match this maniac. Turl went to the right. Johnny had outguessed him and gone the same direction. Turl went further right. Johnny had outguessed him and was in front of him again, ready with firing guns. Turl went up. Johnny's hands on the keyboard did not outguess him, and Turl was almost able to dart past and return to rake the compound assault teams. Johnny corrected and almost rammed Turl from below. Why hadn't he battered the monster's head off in the morgue? But there had been no time. Turl went low to the right, and then to the left, and then to the right rhythmically, easy to predict. Johnny was in front of him at every time. Too late, Johnny realized it was a trap. The 4th time, Turl's guns were firing at the place where Johnny was about to be. Only the slip of a finger on the key had saved him from being blasted out of the sky. Abruptly, Turl seemed to abandon his effort to get through to the compound. He headed straight north. Down below, the burning plane sent up soaring clouds of black smoke. Was this another Turl trick, luring him off? Ears blasted by the scream of tortured motors, Turl kept going. Johnny swept his eyes across the view screens. Where was Turl going, and why? With a sudden hunch, he flipped on the heat detection screen. Chrissy and Patty riding to the north. the horses' bellies to the ground as they raced along. Leverage. Johnny realized that suddenly Turl was trying to get back his leverage. If he could recover his hostages, he might bring pressure on Johnny. Johnny flipped open the local command radio. Sure enough, Turl's voice. If you don't get down there, land animal, I'll kill them both. Turl was right ahead of him, dropping down to about 4,000 feet. Johnny hit his keys. He estimated exactly where Turl would be. Johnny's battle plane slammed into the back of Turl's. Johnny's closed the switch for the magnetic grip. The skids of his plane locked onto the back of Turl's. Half deafened by the thud of impact, Johnny stepped up his speed control to hypersonic. His motors shrieked. He punched in coordinates to compare with 6 feet underground directly below them. He glanced over the side to see where the riders were clear of their spots, and they were. The girls would be safe. The motors of both ships were screaming in discord, fighting against one another in a howling dissonance. They jerked and wrestled in the sky, suspended in space. The motors began to get hot, very hot. Very shortly they would burn and explode. Johnny reached back for the jetpacks. The straps had already been shortened, and he shrugged into it. He made sure he still had Turl's belt gun. He took one final glance at the keyboard, locked in, 6 feet underground. Directly below, 4,000 feet down. Speed control, hypersonic. Johnny dove out the plane door. The air bit at him as he plummeted down. His jets barked alive when the descent slowed. By swinging his legs, he went up to a higher altitude. He looked at the locked and fighting ships. He had expected that Turl would bail out. The outcome was inevitable. The ships would explode. He was counting on Turl's having no belt gun, and he intended to hunt him down with a jetpack or on the ground. But Turl didn't bail out. Johnny could see him battering away at his control console. Johnny, holding his space with his backpack jets, had a sickening feeling he had made a mistake. Turl, after all, he knew silent tactics backward. What Turl was doing in that jerking, fighting mess where one ship's motors fought the others was trying to outguess the settings of the plane that rode his back. If he could, both motors would agree. Possibly then, with a quick run and reversal of the settings, could throw off the other ship. The smoke from those conflicting motors was already beginning to rise in the battle plane. Johnny's plane was beginning to burn. Suddenly, Turl got the combination. Both ships' motors smoothed into shrieking agreement. But Johnny's combination was straight down, 6 feet under, at hypersonic. At an abrupt 2,000 miles an hour, both ships hurtled toward the Earth. In an instant, Turles apparently realized that this set of console coordinates was sudden death. Johnny could see him in the cabin, moving urgently. With only 500 feet to go, Turl frantically punched in the reverse combination. His ship motors went into a fighting howl. The inertia of the mass carried it down to within 20 feet of the ground before the descent halted. But the force of the hot motors was too great for them to overcome. Both ships burst into an orange ball of fire. Turl's body hurtled out of the door and struck rolling. The ship struck. With a swing of his legs, Johnny headed downward into a dive. With a thumb on the jetpack throttle, he guided himself to land about 100 feet from the fiercely flaming wreck. Turl was still rolling. Johnny shed his jetpack. It was almost expended anyway, and he didn't want taking his eyes from Turl. He drew the belt gun and slid off its safety. Turl had been on fire for a moment. Now he was fine. He had rolled it out and was the damp spring glass. He was 50 feet away, lying motionless, and he was wearing a breathe mask. Johnny approached cautiously. This was a very treacherous beast. He walked within 40 feet, 30 feet. Turl was just lying there, inert. A statement Robert the Fox had made him remember has drifted into Johnny's brain. Plan well, but when battle was joined, expect the unexpected and cope with it. Turl's escape had scrambled their plans. The compound down there was without air cover. The Lord alone knew what was going on. The sound of gunfire was rattling and thudding in the distance. The mutter of flames came from the burning planes nearby. Johnny didn't look. He had his eyes on Turl, watchful. He stopped. 25 feet was close enough. He could not quite see through the faceplate, but Turl was singed. There was dried green blood on his jacket. Suddenly Turl's hand blurred and a small gun appeared in it like magic. Johnny dropped at the first hint of motion and fired. There was a flash as Turl's gun exploded in his paw, and then he was up and starting to run. There were questions Johnny wanted answered. His first snapshot had been that lucky he had hit the gun. He drew a careful bead on Turl's right leg. Here's one for the horses. He fired. The leg buckled and Turl went down. The foot stayed twisted in the wrong direction. Johnny walked over to where the exploded gun lay. It was a very slim weapon. Was this what he was called, an assassin gun? Turl was lying there, motionless. Quit shamming, Turl. Turl suddenly laughed and got up. Why didn't you die in the morgue? Animal! He twisted his foot so it was facing the right direction. But he was still trying to work out about the gun. He was still 20 feet away. I could hold my breath for 4 minutes. He was too cheerful. His leg was bleeding through his pants. He was singed, but he was too cheerful. Johnny knew there was something else. He backed up. Moving so he could keep Turl in view out of the corner of his eye, he glanced around the plain. The compound was behind them. Maybe 20 miles? Gunfire was coming faintly from that direction. He knew he should make some effort to help them. But where were the girls? Probably they had gone on. No, shit. There they were. Johnny hadn't expected this. They were coming back, riding at a slow trot. Cautiously, they were coming back. They were about a mile away. It hit Johnny suddenly. The shock of not finding them in the cage, the fear that they were still in that Holocaust down there, it had stayed suspended in his mind. But now he was swept by a tide of relief. They were alive. Johnny waved his arm to signal them to come in. Still alert to Turl, Johnny scanned further afield. One of the pilots that had bailed out was coming in his direction. He peered across. Yes, there was somebody moving about 4 miles to the south. Hard to see due to the camouflage dress, but a trained eye, such as Johnny's, detected the motion of things, not only by the contrast of clothing. Turl was laughing again. You'll never get away with it, animal. Silo will be into this place like a swarm. Johnny didn't answer. He waved the girls in, and the horses were shying as they came round the burning wreck. Chrissy was mounted on Old Pork, Patty on Dancer. The horses weren't blowing, so they earlier riding had not been that fast. The girls were unable to believe it was Johnny. Chrissy stayed mounted. She kept some distance. She was ghastly pale. Her neck was raw red from the collar that was now gone. Johnny? Is that you, Johnny? He looked so different in the blue clothing. Patty had no doubts whatsoever. Jailbait sprang from the back of Dancer and raced at Johnny and put her arms around his waist, which made that her face was at a height of his. See, I told you, Chrissy. I told you Johnny would come. I told you. Chrissy was sitting on a horse and she was crying. I wanted to go first. You got the monster. Pointing at Turl. Don't get between me and him, said Johnny, caressing her hair, hand on the back of her head, but holding the gun upon Turl. He should be at the compound. He must not dally here. Johnny didn't move. He didn't want the girls near him, just in case Turl tried to attack. He had a sudden idea. Chrissy, look down to the south there, about 4 miles away. Chrissy took a grip on herself and wiped her eyes. Johnny wanted to do something. She looked. She tried to speak, then cleared her throat and tried again. Yes, Johnny. She looked harder. It's something moving. It's a friend. Right down there. Yes, I know he's wearing a miniskirt. He's Scottish. Don't worry about it. Right down there as fast as you can and whip up Old Pork and bring him back here. Chrissy straightened up. She guided Old Pork well around Turl and then lit out to the south, her hair streaming back as Old Pork raced away. The gunfire was picking up in volume to the south. Being gentle with Patty and walking sideways whilst keeping a gun on Turl, Johnny got to a position where he could see the compound. They stood on a slightly higher rise than it. In the clear afternoon air, he could see it in miniature, but vividly. White water was spraying 200 or 300 feet into the air. It looked like a waterfall in reverse. Then he knew what had happened. The automatic fire sprinkler system had let go. Those Scots down there were fighting in a torrent of water. What he was afraid of was that the silos would get out a tank or some additional battle planes. He surveyed the sky. It was free of planes. As he watched, he saw a flash of fire, then a distant thump came to them, the sound bazookas make. He was not sure the bazookas could get through a silo tank. They needed air support down there, and here he was 20 miles away. There wasn't another single pilot in those assault teams. They had committed their all. He shifted the gun impatiently. Tyrrell was sitting there laughing again. By rights, he should simply shoot in full of daylight. But he had a feeling Tyrrell knew something, and was up to something more. How'd the girls get away? Why, animal, how can you doubt me? I promised you, I promised, I said, I promised. I let them loose as soon as you delivered the gold. I simply kept my word this morning. I didn't suspect you'd be so false. I didn't think you would come off it, Tyrrell. Why'd you let them loose? Tyrrell laughed again more loudly. Patty had gone over to her dancer, and he was wandering off. She was coming back. I don't know why this nasty old awful thing did it, but just before dawn, he cut off our collars and told us to get onto horses and ride away. We went about 10 miles and hid, thinking maybe you might show up, but we had no place to go. And then this afternoon, the whole place seemed to blow up. Bang, bang! And we rode toward the mountains. Suddenly, Johnny added it all up. He spoke to Tyrrell. So you murdered Char, and you left him in the cage with that man knife in him, so that man could be blamed for his death. The question is, Tyrrell, how are you going to wipe out the humans? Tyrrell had been looking at his watch. He reached toward his pocket. Johnny abruptly made him desist. Just 2 talons, says Tyrrell. Johnny indicated he could, but was very watchful. Tyrrell plucked something that was about a foot square from a side pocket, moving very delicately and gingerly under the watchful gun. It was a large remote computer board, thin, familiar in machine operation, but a bit bigger and dirtier than usual. With a laugh, Tyrrell tossed it toward Johnny, who backed up just in case it exploded. You took the wrong remote off me, rat brain. Johnny stared down at it, not comprehending. The keyboard only had date, hour, and fire on it. It had no stop or correction tab. It's irreversible. Once punched, once activated. That board is worthless. This morning, before the semi-annual, I used it up. Tyrrell glanced at his watch. In about 10 minutes, you'll all collect your pay, whether you messed up on silo or not. And he began to laugh. You went to the wrong remote. The laughter made him splutter in his face mask. And here you are, 20 miles away, and you can't do a thing about it. I mean, you couldn't anyway. He pounded his paws in the dirt, and he was laughing so hard. At that exact moment, Zit, in the underground hangars, was almost out of his wits. Ever since that wild recall, things had been in chaos. The rumor had been flying about that it was humans out there. Men! Zit knew better. Those silly slugs could do nothing. It was undoubtedly toneps landing in here from their system. Zit, although thinking he was interrupting every few seconds by cursing at Tyrrell, had it all worked out. The toneps had buggered up the teleportation bands to paralyze the counterattack and were to here after the still not inconsiderable mineral content of the planet. I really wish the guides used more punctuation. There had been trouble with the toneps before, and the last war of them was kind of inconclusive. They were short, half the size of a silo, and they could breathe almost anything. They were immune to silo gas barrages, worse luck. Therefore, he was rigging a Mark 32 low-flying ground strafer, the most heavily gunned plane in the hundreds of planes in these hangars. And damn and blast that Tyrrell, he was supposed to be in charge of defence. And where was the standby on the biplanes? Out there in the weather. And where were the tanks? Snug and rusting in the underground tank park. And where were the reserves at other mine sites? He pulled them all in here underground. Damn Turl, there was no fuel cartridge or ammunition supply inside the compound. Zit was illogical in blaming Turl for this, since it was against company rules to store them in the compound. They were nearly a half-mile from here. The two parties of silos that had tried to get to the dump had been slaughtered. And that was another thing that proved it must have been toe-naps. The silos to have been hit, they exploded. Pale green flash. Boom. Psh. Only toe-naps could invent weapons like that. So he had to scavenge in the old planes and the ground cars and the half-used cartridges and ammunition charges. Oh, there was quite a bit to be found, but it couldn't be depended on. He had come to physical blows with the two Chamco brothers, blast them. They were readying up a heavy armoured tank. Two tanks had gotten out of that violent afternoon had been blown to cinders. So the Chamcos were rigging one of the old brutes of the Basher class. Bash our ways to glory on the plates. Nothing could penetrate its hide, and its guns wrecked things for miles. The Chamcos were scavenging fuel and ammunition cartridges for that one as well, and they had the nerve, the twisted metal nerve, to maintain that the attackers were Hockners from Duralab, a system Silo had completely whipped 200 years ago. The battle had been over who got the cartridges, and that pompous midget Kerr had come down here and given up. He gives them half each. Another Turl mess. The cartridges didn't fit the Mark 32, so he had spent valuable time machining a false case around them to get them in the tubes. Damn Turl! He had told his men to move that damn drone 2 hours ago, and damn Turl! Now, here he was. He had found a co-pilot, one of the executives in the draft that had just arrived, rated combat on a Mark 32 named a dimwit. But that's what you got in an out-of-the-way planet like this. Who thought it was a typical Bolbot attack? Bolbots? Based on a rumour he had heard in the Cabango shops lately in the Imperial City, that a conquest of the Bolbots was intended. This had collected a combat breathe mask, got on a shoulder bag of extra vials, got on his sidearms, put spare rations in his pocket, and last but not least, his favourite wrench in the side of his boot. A wrench that sometimes came in very handy in any kind of fight or situation. The Mark 32 motors turned over easily. It purred. In no time at all, he would be out there, and that would be a very positive end to this attack. Damn Turl. Zid let off the skid grips and taxied to Mark 32. Hit him low! Kill him! Toward the firing door. Mechanics leaped to get out of the way, and the place was in turmoil. Silos trying to get planes ready with nothing. And that damn drone was still standing there. Ordinarily, you could fire 3 planes at once through that door. It was high enough even to add a 4th. But that ancient relic of a gas drone was so wide and so tall, it was blocking the entire door. Just what he told Turl, he told him before. Damn Turl, there was no way he could get the Mark 32 past it. Zit leaned out the door and screamed for the shift foreman. He came rushing up, and Zit almost bit him. Move that damn drone. 2 hours ago, it won't dolly. It won't dolly. We had 4 dolly trucks trying to push it. It won't move. Zit gave his equipment bag a hoist onto his shoulder and sprang down. You imbecile crutch, the only inside control that thing has is its mag grapnels. Why haven't you let it off? Those big skids are magnetically locked to this platform. Why don't you learn? It's a very old drone. Very old drone. Zit rushed to the door. He saw the drone and he tried to climb up. It was a huge door, big enough to load a dozen gas canisters at a single time. Somebody had put a rolling ladder up there already, and Zit ran up it, his equipment clattering, and he pried at the door. It was locked. An armoured door itself the size of a plane. Where's the key? Turl had it. We've looked everywhere for Turl. We can't find him. Damn Turl. Have you searched his rooms? Yeah, we did. At that moment, a high-pitched voice bit into the roar of the hangar. Yoo-hoo! It was Chirk. Zit was staring daggers of hostility, the cheap twit. But she was holding a single, huge key. I found this in his desk. Where are the other keys to this thing? The preset box keys? That's the only one there was in the entire desk. It gave Zit an instant's pause. He didn't want this damn old relic firing itself off in the hangar with no way to get out, but he had to move it. This was a door key, and they were passing it up to him. He glared at the key. 3 toggles pitted. The shaft almost in 2. Turl could at least have made a new bloody key, but oh no, it was Paul's off for this job. He shoved the key, all 20 pounds of it, into the lock hole. He twisted it with a curse. Damn Turl! The rusty magnetic clenchers gave. The key fell apart. Zit flung it to the platform below, narrowly missing Chirk. At least the door now was open. He struggled to swing it back. Even the hinges were decayed and stiff. It opened to reveal the enormous interior. Zit got a torch. There were no lights in this thing. It was never meant to have a pilot. It was just tons and tons and tons of gas canisters, engines, and armor. He thought belatedly he might have robbed some fuel from it, but that was too late now. He lumbered forward, trying to go to the control compartment. He had better throw them off, but no. They were armor-locked, solid. They couldn't be unset without a key, and this metal wouldn't surrender to anything. It was armored. Damn Turl! He darted his light around. He found the magnetic grip release, the only interior control, put there so hangar staff and firing people could lock and unlock when it was moving it around with tractors. Zit reached for the release, and the brake came off. But just before he could touch it properly, it moved. He froze, looking at it in horror. Yes, there was a click for the preset box. He dove for the door. The forward jerk of the motors threw him off his feet. He scrambled for the exit. Too late. The hangar door was fleeing by. It was already yards down to the ground. He didn't dare jump. The drum took off, its rusty side door flapping in the wind. Zit let out a shuddering groan. Damn Turl. Well, at least now they can get the battle planes out and then they'll start up attack. And all this on half pay and no bonuses. And that was probably Turl's doing too. Damn Turl. Johnny, 20 miles away, saw the drone launch. It was a huge thing. The gas drone, he went ice cold. The flash of an explosion boomed on the side of it, and he knew it would be a bazooka firing. There was a team down there to prevent the launching of planes. A second flash, and the hole and the boom and the first one drifted faintly toward them. Neither had the slightest effect upon the drone. It rose in stately massiveness 2,000 feet. As it turned, still climbing, it headed northwest. It went by them to the east, looming in the sky, so big it looked close even though 2 miles away. It was ragged and patched and dented, the evidence of former combat on its discolored hide. A tense Johnny clocked it about 300 miles an hour. A battle plane had fired just behind it. Bazooka missiles hit the plane, exploded in 2 flares of light. It continued sedately on its way, following the drone. As it passed over them, he saw it was a different type of battle plane. The silo numbers 32 were on its side, and then the smoke logos of the silos. An escort? The heavy roars beat the earth. When they had gone, Turl said, "Why not admit it, animal? You licked." "Yeah, we're patty at growing heights. When the silos counterattack from home planet, you'll already be gone. So why not toss that gun over here and we can make a deal?" Johnny ignored him. He was carefully tracking the compass course of the drone, relating it in the afternoon sun. He watched it as long as he could as it droned away to the northeast. It was not turning further. Be calm, he told himself. Don't panic. Where's it going first? A battle plane could do 2,000 miles an hour. You can catch it. Be calm. "Throw a gun over here. and I'll tell you all about it. Turtle's motions alarmed Patty.
Don't believe anything he says. Gobble, gobble, gobble. He promises food and didn't bring any, but he did give us some protein, and it tasted horrible. He even made that to us 2 or 3 times that you were brown bread.
You'll tell me about it, said Johnny, or I'll start shooting off your feet. He aimed the gun.
Do it, says Patty. Do it. He's a nasty old brute, a devil, and his cock tasted horrible.
Johnny was glancing in the direction where Chrissy had gone. She was taking an awfully long time coming back. Well, the Scottish guy hadn't been laid for a while. He couldn't leave the girls out here alone, and certainly not with a Scottish guy, or with Turl alive. Be calm, be calm. You can catch up with it. All right, says Turl. I'll give you the places it's going. In proper order. You'd get a kick out of shooting me, wouldn't you? I don't get any enjoyment out of hurting things the way you do. Oh, that's because you're a rat brain. All this silent talk between Johnny and Turl was making Patty very nervous.
Don't listen to him, Johnny. Just shoot him. I'm a psychotic. I want him dead.
All right. I'll tell you what. His first target is the bottom of Africa. The next is China. The next is Russia. Then his preset is to fly to Italy, and then right here. Good thought, Johnny. He didn't mention Scotland. It's heading over the Arctic on that course, Scotland, and its first target will be up because the Saudis couldn't get up there, or thought they couldn't get to. Thank you, Turl. Good. For information received, you live a while longer. It would take 17 hours for it to reach Scotland. Look calm. You can catch it. Chrissy was coming down. They had been hidden by a dip in the plains. The horse was at a walk, and he saw why as she came near. It was Thor. She was holding him upright in front of her on the horse. She had removed her buckskin jacket and was using her breast to hold it out and was using it for bandages. Thor's anti-radiation suit was stained with blood from around his left shoulder. She had torn it away and now she used the buckskin and grass to staunch the blood flow. Thor's left arm was broken and bound in rough sticks for splints. It was he who had been shot out of the sky when he was using the jetpack. With Chrissy's help, Thor slid off the horse. He was grey from blood loss and from no sunlight because he lives in Scotland, and stood unsteadily. He looked at Johnny ruefully.
Okay, I'm sorry, Johnny, for my performance in Thor Part 2, 3, and 4.
It was my fault, not yours, said Johnny. Ease him down on that rock, Chrissy. Thor looked at Turl. He had seen the monster close up only a couple of times. Thor was wearing a .45 Smith & Wesson revolver from the old base arsenal, loaded with radiation bullets. He suddenly recognized Turl and grabbed for his gun to shoot him. No, just keep the gun drawn and train it on him and shoot him the moment it looks like he's going to move. Particularly his hands. Can you sit there okay? Thor was about 50 feet from Turl. He eased down further and got the gun trained on Turl. Now, Turl, that gun he's holding can put a hole in you and through a horse. You could drive through it. It has special explosive bullets, worse than your own blast gun. You got that? Be calm in front of these people. Must be calm. I can catch up with the drone. He turned to Patty. He gave her the huge blast pistol to hold.
But that's not what you normally give me to hold, Johnny.
He showed her where the trigger was.
That's the balls.
And she determinedly walked back to a rock so she could support the gun with it.
I'll point it like this.
And keep it on him. You have time. Do a good job here. Why not kill him? He leaks information. Turl couldn't understand what they were saying, but he got the drift. Johnny took out a knife and, keeping out of the line of possible fire, made Turl swivel around. He inserted the knife into Turl's collar, and cut the cloth down the back. He went round the front, watching Turl's eyes for a telltale clench, signaling action, and he pulled the coat sleeves off. He ripped the cloth down the sides of Turl's legs. He darted a shallow stab at Turl when he sought to spring. Turl subsided. Johnny got Turl's boots and pants off. He took his watch, he took his cap, and the only thing Tyrrell had left was his breathe mask, and Johnny even took the emergency files from that. Tyrrell glared. There he sat, his fur matted with sweat, his claws twitching to rake Johnny. Johnny took the belt and made Tyrrell put his hands behind his back. He cinched the belt as tight as he could around his wrist. Then he took Old Pork's bridle and tied the wrists and belt and passed them through the rope under the mast tube. He cinched it up. If Tyrrell tried to wrestle his wrist loose, he would choke himself. Do a good job, Johnny kept telling himself. Don't panic. In a battle plane, you can catch that drone. He had been working very fast. He now stepped away from Tyrrell and quickly went through the clothing. Sure enough, Tyrrell had 2 more weapons secreted, a knife and a second assassin gun. Johnny fired a round from the assassin gun. It was silent. The bush he aimed at began to burn. He gave the light gun to Chrissy. Sorry, to Patty. Chrissy doesn't get a gun. She's too busy with the Scots gun. Patty took the belt gun back and gave the belt gun back. What the hell am I saying? Patty took the little gun, gave the big one back to Johnny.
Let me shoot him now,
Thor said to Tyrrell and Silo. The little girl over there is begging to shoot you. I'll be quiet. I'm being quiet. Don't go near him. Light a fire from that rock over there and keep to the side. Chrissy, so that Thor stays warm and you can see this whole area. He turned to Thor. Who's with you? Glenn Cannon. He's over there in the hill somewhere. I think he tried... Why am I doing Irish? To get closer to the base. I tried to reach him on his mind radio twice. He's got one, but he doesn't answer. They've only got a 5-mile range. Where are you going? At that moment, there was an explosion flash at the compound. A battle plane had come out of the hangar and apparently been hit with a bazooka. It soared in a flame ball that crashed at the sound of the bazooka, and then the plane explosion reached them. A second battle plane came out and met the same fate. See? I'll send back a minecar for you. Be calm. At 2,000 miles an hour, I can catch that drone. The girls looked numbly at Johnny. But what could he do? He had meant to send them to the academy base, but Thor was in no shape to travel at all. Why not kill her? Why not kill him? No, it wouldn't solve anything. Sound calm to these people. The speed of a drone was 302 miles per hour. He remembered this from the messages he had taken from the hand of the president 1,000 years dead. A battle plane could go hypersonic, 2,000 miles per hour, and it'd be halfway to Scotland, and he could still catch it hours before it arrived. He swung up on the Dancer. The base was 20 miles away. Make it in an hour? Maybe so. Bit of hard riding. We can still make a deal, animal. If you sent uranium to Silo, you've really messed up. It's been tried before. They got a force field around the receipt platform. Any uranium flashes on Silo, that force field triggers solid. It encloses the whole platform. The flashback occurs at the sending point, just like you saw today. Silo will be attacking this place, animal. You'll need me to mediate. Johnny looked at him. He raised his hand in farewell to the girls and Thor and thumped the hill into Dancer. She streaked off through the declining sunlight. Ahead of him pulsed and flickered the battle at the compound. He had wasted time. He could not have done anything else. Be calm. Be calm. Don't panic. A battle plane could catch that drone. As he reached across the plain, racing toward the base, he put out of his mind a thought that kept crowding in. Not all the armed forces of the United States, in its days of power, had been able to do anything at all to stop that gas drone. Not with planes, missiles, atomic bombs, or even suicide crashes. You have time. You can catch up with it. Don't panic.